My name is Cassidy Wynn, and if you've never been to a family funeral that feels more like a corporate takeover meeting, consider yourself lucky. My father, James Wynn, passed away 3 days ago. No tears, no long speeches. Just a cold draft of air conditioning, a will being read over lukewarm hotel coffee, and my sister Leona holding court like a CEO on bonus day. She didn't even look at me when I walked into the room. That's how things have been since I enlisted. I wasn't the daughter with the law degree, the investment firm, or the penthouse in Manhattan. I was the one who wore boots and saluted for a living. "Cassidy," she said flatly, like she was reading my name off a grocery list. "Didn't expect you to show up all the way from wherever you're stationed these days." "Ramstein Air Base," I answered. She nodded like I'd just told her I work at a gas station. Then she turned back to the attorney, already checking something off on her legal pad. Probably my name off the asset distribution list. Dad's will was short, too short, suspiciously clean. Leona was listed as primary executor. She would manage all remaining real estate, investments, and family accounts. I got a sealed envelope and a thank you for my service. The envelope had a single post-it note stuck to it. "Your father admired your discipline. He wanted you to have this." Inside was his old military challenge coin from the Korean War and a photo of him standing next to a fighter jet in 1975. That was it. No house, no savings, not even the watch he used to wear every day. To Leona, I was the decoration, a uniform at the funeral for optics. She even made a comment about it. "I hope you're not planning to wear that full getup on the flight home," she said as we stood at the check-in counter in Lisbon Airport. "It's my uniform," I replied. "Sure," she smirked. "And I suppose it comes with a little respect me button on the collar?" If I weren't used to that tone, it might have stung, but I was. That's how it always was with her. Snide comments dressed as jokes, condescension sugar-coated in sisterly concern. We boarded our flight Skybridge 3072 to Denver, with a layover in the Azores business class. Not my choice. Leona booked it. Said we had to fly together, because it would look strange otherwise. She sat by the window, of course. I took the aisle. Between us, an empty seat. I figured even that much space wasn't enough to avoid her attitude, and I was right. "You know," she said after takeoff, sipping her Chardonnay, "Dad really wanted us to work together. I think he hoped you'd eventually grow out of the military thing and come home." "I didn't know being stationed overseas was a personality flaw," I said. She gave a little laugh. "It's just. Some people use the army to escape. Others use it to avoid growing up." And one stick, that was her way of calling me a coward without actually saying the word. Classic Leona. I turned to the in-flight entertainment screen and scrolled through the movies, not because I wanted to watch anything, but because I needed an excuse not to look at her. She went quiet for a bit. I thought that was it. Then she leaned in and dropped this one. "You do know you're no longer in the will, right?" I froze. She smiled, real slow. "The mental health clause. It disqualifies beneficiaries with unresolved psychological records." I stared at her. "What are you talking about?" "Oh, Cassidy," she sighed dramatically. "Remember that eval after Syria? The 3 months of mandatory leave? It's not personal. It's legal." That's when it clicked. She'd dug through my military records. She'd found my lowest moment and used it to push me out of my father's legacy. "You leaked my evaluation?" I asked quietly. "I shared it with the estate attorney," she said, "to protect the family's interests. You're still family, of course." That wasn't concern. That was calculated sabotage. Right then, I realized something. This flight was more than just a trip home. It was the final stage of a silent war my sister had been fighting against me for years. I just hadn't been paying attention. But I was now. Like where this is going. Drop a comment if you've ever had family drama on a plane, and hit that subscribe button for more wild true story breakdowns like this one. She ordered another drink, called the flight attendant by her first name like they were old friends, and laughed at something on her phone. I stared out the window, not at the clouds, but past them. I wasn't angry. I was done being angry at Leona. I was calculating. There's a difference. I thought about Dad's coin, the fighter jet, his silence at the end. Maybe he knew. Maybe that coin wasn't a gift, it was a message. I slid it from my pocket and gripped it in my hand. just as the seatbelt sign dinged, somewhere over the Atlantic, at cruising altitude, with Leona smirking in seat 14 Ampere, the first turbulence hit. No one paid much attention. At first, the first jolt made Leona spill her wine. She looked down, cursed under her breath, and pressed the call button with the kind of irritation only people used to getting their way can produce. I didn't flinch. Turbulence doesn't scare me. Unchecked egos in window seats? That's a different story. The flight attendant came over quickly, polite but clearly busy. "We're hitting a little bit of chop, ma'am. Would you like a napkin or a towel?" Leona didn't answer right away. She gave the woman a tight smile, then gestured toward her stained blouse like she expected her to produce a dry cleaner on the spot. "Whatever you have. And maybe less bouncing next time?" The attendant, to her credit, didn't roll her eyes. She handed over a napkin and moved on. I would have applauded if I wasn't worried Leona would take it personally. The lights dimmed slightly. Outside, the sun dipped behind a stretch of clouds that looked like burnt cotton. I shifted in my seat, tugged the edge of my jacket straight, and tried to settle in. But Leona wasn't done. Of course not. She pulled out her iPad, opened an email with bold red letters, and tilted it just enough for me to see without actually handing it over. "Got final confirmation from the trust attorney," she said. "It's done. I'm assuming you won't contest?" I didn't respond, mostly because I wasn't sure whether I wanted to scream or laugh. She continued like she was leading a board meeting. "The Valence Trust is being folded into my firm. I'll manage it for now. Unless, of course, you've got experience with managing multi-state asset portfolios while flying jets over conflict zones." I turned to face her fully. "You actually think you're the only one in this family who understands structure?" I asked. She smirked. "I think I'm the only one who didn't abandon it." That one stung, but I didn't let her see it. Leona always made it sound like I ran away from home at 18 and never looked back. Which is almost true, except she never asks why. She doesn't remember the night Dad yelled at her for messing with the estate accounts and I took the blame to keep him from cutting her off. She doesn't remember the hours I spent driving Mom to chemo while she sat in her LSAT prep class pretending none of us existed. She doesn't remember because she doesn't want to. There's something suffocating about flying next to someone who thinks they've won a war you weren't even fighting. I looked out the window again, pretending to be fascinated by the ocean below. The plane cut through a narrow cloud bank. The seatbelt light blinked on again, and the captain's voice came over the speaker. "Ladies and gentlemen, we've hit a bit of turbulence. Please remain seated with your seatbelts fastened." Leona gave a theatrical sigh. You'd think a first-class flight could afford a smoother ride. I ignored her. Across the aisle, a man in his 40s wearing a Denver Nuggets hoodie looked pale. His hands clenched the armrests. Next to him, his teenage daughter was quietly crying into a travel pillow. Nerfs. Understandable. What wasn't understandable was how people like Leona could coast through life thinking everything should bend to them. People like her didn't just climb ladders, they pulled them up behind them. "Does this kind of thing happen a lot?" she asked, glancing at me like I was an airline employee. "Turbulence?" "Yes," I said. "Your attitude?" "Also yes." She rolled her eyes. "You're in a mood. I'm in a cabin with you. There's a difference." She opened her mouth to respond, then stopped. Another jolt rocked the plane, this time hard enough to shift our overhead bins. A few clicks and slams followed. Someone yelped further back. A baby started to cry. The flight attendants began walking faster, checking belts, calming passengers. Leona suddenly looked less smug. "I swear," she muttered, "if this becomes a thing." It already was a thing. I could feel it. Not just turbulence. Something was off. Years in the air had trained me to spot patterns, how metal vibrates, how wind interacts with fuselage. This wasn't routine. The engines whined, then dipped, then recalibrated again. Not normal. I glanced toward the cockpit. No movement. A sharp bang echoed from the tail section, followed by what sounded like a mechanical hiccup. People gasped. The cabin lights flickered once. That's when I felt it in my gut. We weren't dealing with a bumpy ride. The smell of burnt plastic was faint at first, just enough to make you wonder if it was in your head. Leona wrinkled her nose and looked around like someone had dared to use an aerosol in her presence. I knew that smell. Wiring. Possibly a short, possibly worse. A soft chime rang out overhead. Then silence. No announcements. no crew moving. Just that hum of every passenger realizing at the same time that something wasn't quite right. Leona finally turned to me. Should they be saying something? I didn't answer. My brain was already running checklists. The tone shift in the engine, the vibration changes, that faint chemical smell, none of it added up to routine turbulence. Still, I wasn't in uniform. I wasn't in control. I was just another passenger. So I waited. Then came the whine. A pitch shift in the right engine, high, drawn out, mechanical, and then a sudden pop. Not a loud explosion, but a sharp, gut-punching sound that made the whole cabin flinch. The lights dimmed again. This time they didn't come back on immediately. A baby started screaming. A few passengers gasped or cursed.